Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Leppy Duels. I'm your host, Jacob Arvidson, and we are once again presented by Jarvie Media this week. It's week 14. If you're new here, here's how the show works. In a moment, you will meet our 4 distinguished guests. Each of those guests will go 1v1 versus the other 3 contestants. Within each duel, each contestant will have 1 minute to deliver their points on the assigned debate topic, along with an additional 20 seconds to respond to their opponent's comments. After that, I as the host will determine a winner of each duel, and the first one to fill up their scoring bar wins the episode. Simple enough. Let's meet this week's cast. First up, he's defending his championship from last week, or his double championship if you include the flex start he won just before coming on the show, Seth Fendley. Joining Seth this week, he's the team captain at Discraft Underground. Give it up for Wes Shinevar. Third, joining us after a brief hiatus, the owner of Stillwagon in Houston, Texas, Mr. Matt Stillwagon. And finally, rounding out the cast this week, he's the brand manager at Great Lakes Disc, Brian Papa Wolf Frawley. Thanks for joining us, guys, this week. Pleasure to have all 4 of you on the show. Let's get into it. Seth, Matt, you guys are going to be up first. You guys are debating the Masters Cup and other tournaments like it, kind of being pushed to the side and removed from the Pro Tour's schedule. What's your take on that? Are we losing anything as a sport without these historic courses and tournaments being involved on the tour? Seth?
Yeah, I think calling it the official tour, it makes it an interesting discussion, because the reality is that the event was still played this weekend and there were still a lot of big names there. And one of the things that we have to think about when it comes to what's on tour and what's not on tour, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, is like, how do we decide what stays and what goes? Well, last year, the Masters Cup had some massive mess ups. They didn't plan on having the golf course available to practice for the pros before the tournament. They were just going to set it up Saturday night before the Sunday round and let the pros go play it. And that was, not a good look for the tour or for the event. And that was one of the sort of deciding factors, more so than any of the other reasons, as to why it's not on tour this year. I think, is it possible that we see it back on the official tour down the road? Potentially. But the reality is, for the way that the event's set up currently, it just doesn't make logistical sense in this time frame to try to do it.
All right, good take from Seth. Matt, where are you going with this question?
All right, I'm going to start by echoing some of the sentiments that he had. The setup issues previous, there are reasons that things happen. My thing is this, though. Several times you guys have talked about needing to add things to the tour, remove things from the tour, and I think that that's great, but I think we need to not lose sight of the fact of devaluing other tour events that are out there simply because they don't have DGPT in front of it. If we're doing that, then what are we really doing to the rest of the competitive side of the sport? There actually needs to be more of this. That said, I think that one of the things that's going to have to come into play for a lot more of these higher level events, or if the DGP sets a particular standard, is these events are going to be graded on performance. Ultimately speaking, that's better for the sport. We'll see other tournaments that will learn from the other mistakes. It'll produce a sharper product over time, make it more competitive, and what's bad about that? But let's not devalue what this weekend was. I mean, Barsby's out there. Tell me that's not a great name. Tell me that it's not great to see him win the tournament. It's still an A tier. There's nothing to scoff at. I think I looked at the purse and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of around 36 grand. Okay, so you're not exactly going out and buying a house with that, but that's still seriously decent money. I don't think we devalue it, but I do think that the follies of the past have caught up with the event, and therefore people are going to start looking for something better, another opportunity. If that comes about with what they're replacing it with, then great. If not, maybe they get another crack at it.
All right, Seth, I want you to kind of return to the initial question if you can. Matt touched on it a little bit. He sees some positive potentially coming out of it. Are we losing anything, though, without tournaments like the Masters Cup on the official tour?
So I think if there were multiple events that we were seeing sort of coming and going that had legacy built to them that we should be concerned. But the reality is that we have events like the USDGC, we have events like Maple Hill that have been around for almost as long as, or I guess long enough, I should say, to be canonized into disc golf, right? And those are their mainstays; they're not going anywhere. Whereas this event in particular lost its status because of some missteps on the event organization side, but also just the way that the course flows. And I think that what we're going to see is that, to Matt's point, things are going to get better because of things like this. But we're also so new in the sport that we're not losing as much as people think that we're losing by having one course maybe not be featured as heavily as it has been in the past.
All right, Matt, final thoughts from you?
Evolution happens. The sport is evolving. The courses are evolving. What passes for a good tournament is evolving. You either keep up or the sport passes you by. And it's sad but true. So, no, we're not losing anything. I don't think this is the end of the legacy of that tournament, though. I think with some proper feedback, constructive criticism, and the right players in place, it can return to the glory that it previously had been, if that's the direction they choose to go. Maybe they find success in other avenues, but I still think it's a great event. I still think it was a well-run event this past weekend. I love seeing Barsby and that big old grin of his on the podium. So, no, we're not losing anything.
All right. I love where you guys went with that. I think it was important that both of you took the time to touch on kind of the reasons why the Masters Cup was quote-unquote removed from the official tour and not labeled as a DGPT event like it has been in the past. So I'm glad you both touched on that. Pretty even duel, point for point, from both of you, generally having the same idea at the end of the day. I'm going to give the deal breaker here in favor of Seth, though, because Matt took closer to 2 minutes to deliver his opening speech. So Seth takes the win here in duel number 1. Wes, Brian, you guys are up for duel number 2. Wes, you're going to be up first. We've got some complaints from other players, namely Trevor, which kind of spiked this question last week when we were talking before the show. But what's wrong with the Pro Tour's registration system for tournaments, and how do we go about fixing it? Wes?
Yeah, I asked a couple of pros who are buddies of mine what the registration is specifically to see what concerns they might have, and all of their answers were, I'm not sure what the registration system is. So I think maybe just communication is kind of a big point here, but you can go online, you could Google what the registration system is, and it appears to pop up with kind of some general guidelines. It's more of a tiered system, which I'm actually in favor of. So as we're talking about what's wrong with the system, I'm actually seeing some things that I kind of like here. The tier 1 specifically is 1,000 plus for MPO, 900 plus for FPO. I think that could actually be a little bit higher for FPO as you're looking at these fields and the quality of players that are getting in there. And then you kind of work in a rating-based system going down as Reg opens. I think the people that I've heard complaining are the people that are maybe like 935 or 835 in this tier 3 of registration systems because they want to play these big events. But at the same time, we're talking here about the prestige, the growth of the sport, and all of the good things that are happening at these Disc Golf Pro Tours. And so, if your rating isn't high enough to get in there, you're going to get squeezed out. So all in all, I actually kind of like the system that is in place.
All right, Wes is in favor of it. Brian, what's your take on the registration?
It's not bad. It's not hard, but it is too easy. That's my main concern. As our sport continues to evolve, just like Matt said on our earlier debate, we need to focus on higher level everything, and that includes higher level players. 1,000 is too low right now. I think 1,010 is maybe even too low. Maybe it needs to go to a 10, 15 for the next year. And then somebody's instantly going to say, well, how does the other person get in? How does the local pro get in? How does that type of stuff get in? You've seen some great successes from qualifiers this year, to the point of a holding spot for waitlists like the OTP Open just had this week, where they didn't even need to run the qualifier because enough people unregistered. In all honesty, looking at the MPO specifically, it's just too easy to get a tour card. I think you should be able to qualify for tour cards at bigger events, like I've argued in my relegation argument before. But in general, I think the lowest number should be probably in the 115 range.
All right, so there was some differentiation there between your two different thoughts on the same topic. So Wes, go ahead and respond to Brian's comments and double down on yours if you need to.
Yeah. Brian brought up the tour card segment. I don't know exactly what the criteria are for the tour card, but I know that you can register at the beginning of the year or apply for the tour card, and if you get that, then you can pick which events you're planning to register for, and I believe automatically get in there. And then you get into these tiered registration systems. Again, I don't dislike them. I think 1,000 is a good number. 1,000 rated player is still a quality player. There's still somebody to me that if they play a good tournament at any of these events, they could still cash. I think that's a fair number. If I was going to make any changes, I would actually cut off the lower end of this, where these tier 3, tier 4 registrations, 935 and 835 plus, I would actually just cut those out. I would say the 970 for MPO and 870 for FPO is kind of the bottom line. I don't think anybody kind of in those ratings is going to cash anyway. So are they really competitive, or are they just donating? If I was going to make any change to the system, that's actually what I would do, is just kind of cut the lower end off of it.
All right, Brian, go ahead and respond to Wes.
Yeah, like I said, I think the lowest PDGA rating to be allowed in MPO to sign up for a Disc Golf Pro Tour event should be 1015. Then you can have a qualifier earlier in the week where these lower tiered players can attempt to register. You can have 1,000 and above for a while, and then 950 or whatever. But you don't want to diminish the product, especially on Disc Golf Pro Tour with all these fans coming out, things like that. It's okay not to have a full event, because a quality event and a quality product is still better than having me at 900 go play Maple Hill. No one wants to see that.
All right, so good points for both of you. Brian, I like the way you finished, to be honest, saying that the quality of the event is more important than filling the event. Yeah, you want a lot of people there, but if you miss by a couple of spots, I think you're right. I think the quality is more important than anything. You had interesting takes, both of you guys, on Wes. I think you're setting the floor, the rating floor, just to get into the event is a nice idea. Brian, I think the 10-15 idea with qualifiers is a great idea. But I'm going to lean toward my personal agreement based on what you guys said and the points you made. Brian, I like your qualifier thing. I like setting a high standard, saying, hey, anyone above this rating can get in because you're good enough, but setting the tone by saying, hey, if you're lower, come out to a qualifier, put yourself in that way. I think that's huge. So Brian's going to take the win here, sends us to the next one. Brian, you're going to stay in against Matt. This past week, we had a little bit of buzz surrounding a Reddit post that a user commented along the lines of, the Jomez Pro and DGPT deal is the signification that disc golf is heading into a regression because the sport has business-wise overextended itself over the past couple of years. What's your take on it? Have we really overextended ourselves, and are we headed into a regression, Brian?
Well, in no offense to this gentleman on Reddit, but you're wrong. Thanks for playing. This is the great and awesome thing that just happened with Disc Golf Pro Tour and Jomez, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. But good business sense means you take care of each other and you make sure that you are producing a product from start to finish and getting it out at the greatest means. And right now, the Disc Golf Pro Tour, absorbing Jomez's cameras, absorbing more content, allows us to have a better quality product. It also eliminates a lot of things like having to have 2 HR directors, for instance, with both companies, or having to have 2 different PR people, things like that. Great companies are all, that we know individually are often under one brand. Like we think of Oral-B and Pringles and Tide. Those things don't really have any connections except they're all under Procter & Gamble, which is one giant company. That's great for them, and this is great for disc golf.
All right, Matt, are we headed into a regression?
The first answer is no, we're not headed into a regression. I will say that. What I will say is that I do find that I was concerned about what happened with COVID, where we saw this gigantic spike in numbers with disc golf overall and its popularity, and I felt that it was really overhyped. I mean, the PDGA is quoting great numbers and everything like that. And, oh, we're up in the 200,000. How many of them are actually at the businesses that are out there? There are a lot of businesses that overextend themselves just trying to get in with some of the bigger companies. There's a lot of bad business that's being done out there. There's a lot of entrepreneurship that is stifled in this industry as well. And yet, as has so often been said, we're such a young industry that we need to go some different directions. But there's no single brand out there that can tell you that this is the way you have to have a store set up, or this is the way you have to be a legit business. And yet so many people get suckered into it and find out that, in fact, it wasn't worth it. And they end up losing their butts on the business. I think this looks like a consolidation to the average Joe, like whoever wrote this on Reddit. But I don't think it's a regression. I think it's more of a correction. I think there are consolidations that do need to happen. But I also think that there are other avenues that must come up first.
All right, strong takes from both of you, both hard no's. Talk about, you guys are both in the business side of disc golf with local disc golf shops. So bring that into your argument a little bit to differentiate yourself and separate yourself. Brian?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Dustin Reed from Brentwood, California, PDGA number 258993. He was the latest addition to the PDGA, and we see this in our store every day. More and more people are joining the PDGA. More and more people are joining leagues. We have close to 250 people signed up for our local league in Grand Rapids right now alone. Last weekend or a couple weekends ago, we Great Lakes Disc, ran 3 different PDGA sanctioned events plus 2 leagues on a weekend, and they were all full. The sport is growing. The sport is reaching more and more variety of people. It's okay that some businesses are working together.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, sure. It's okay that some businesses are working together. I mean, I'm in a hotbed of activity for disc golf itself. Houston Disc Golf, I'll give a shout out to them. Run the largest running mini in the nation right now. On a Tuesday night, they average 130 players. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous for a mini. It's growing like a weed. I'm running 2 separate tours right now, an unsanctioned tour and a PDGA tour. Meanwhile, down on the other side of town, there's another group running another tour. The opportunities abound. I think the danger that we run into, though, is when these companies are out there, yes, there are certain ones that will band together to become stronger. That's the nature of business. That's capitalism in and of itself. But a lot of these smaller guys are biting off a little more than they can chew. And a lot of the companies that are out there make it so that you have to bite off more than you can chew. If you're working business because you're scared, then you shouldn't be working business to begin with. But a man's got to know his limitations. And a lot of these companies don't know that.
All right, good stuff from both of you. Again, hard stance, no. You think this this post from this Reddit user is a little bit outlandish and very much wrong. So I appreciate the hardline stance from both of you there. I wish someone had gone a different direction to make this decision a little easier for me, but you went the same way. I'm going to lean toward Matt on this one for bringing in the aspect of COVID and how a lot of smaller disc golf shops tried to pop up and ride the wave of popularity, and they died. And I think that might be playing into this Reddit user's post a little bit as well, seeing consolidation potentially and seeing maybe a local shop or two around him die off because of overextending themselves. So for that reason, I'm giving the win to Matt here. Sends us to the next duel. We've got Wes and we've got Seth. Seth, you are going to be up second. Wes, you're going to be up first. Page 9 of the Pro Tour's Tour Card program talks about drug testing. It hasn't got a whole lot of press, but in there it says it could potentially be here in 2023 toward the end of the season. So first question, are we going to see it in 2023? And then more importantly, when it is implemented, what is it going to do to the tour itself and to the players within the tour? Wes?
Yeah, I think Seth might have an inside scoop on this one over me, so tough debate. I would actually kind of be surprised if we see it here in 2023. It seems maybe a little bit fast to kind of add something to this, but we are moving quickly with the Disc Golf Pro Tour. They're moving, making great advancements. We just talked about the Jomez, and so I don't think we'll see it in 2023, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see it in 2024. What will the implementation do to the players, it says they're working with the player council, so I imagine the Disc Golf Pro Tour is pretty democratic, so this is probably going to be by majority of people that are interested in it, and honestly, I think a majority of people are going to be interested in something like this. Currently, with no drug policy, if somebody is taking PEDs or something else to help them, I believe they just go ahead and get away with it, and so I don't really think that's fair to the field. So some sort of drug policy, I think, is absolutely needed to legitimize and continue to professionalize our sport and the Pro Tour, but I don't think we'll see it this year. It wouldn't surprise me to see it next year, though.
So Seth, Wes is making sure everybody at home knows that you might have an insider advantage on this question, but take it away.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, Jacob did not collude with Jeff Spring on writing this question, but shout out to Team Great Lakes member Phil Delone, who got married this past weekend. And while we were at the wedding reception, Jeff Spring looked at me and he said, "Yeah, we're not implementing it this year, but it's on the docket for next year. It'll be ready to go." And so I think that part we don't really have to talk about. I think Wes and I agree there. It's really about implementation. And so Wes is right in that most of this is actually being driven as much by the council as it is by the tour itself. And so what that means is that some of the testing that's going to be done is really dictated by the players and not so much by what the tour thinks it needs to be tested for. And so in that way, it is democratic and a decision made by everyone, not just like something that the company is doing. And what I think it means for us is, one, to take the next step towards the Olympics, we have to have this in place. And that's really the impetus of it from the Pro Tour's perspective. But secondarily, from the player perspective, it allows them to feel like they are in a more professional environment because you are working towards a place where you're leveling the playing field by making sure that no one is on anything that is enhancing their game.
So similar sentiments from both of you guys. Seth, thanks for the insider knowledge. I did not collude with Jeff on this question, but I might as well have. So thanks for going there. Let's pivot here. Do you think we are going to see anyone fall off because they won't be able to be using the potential substance that they'll get busted for? Or do you think we're going to see maybe someone get in trouble along these lines when it gets implemented? Wes?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what the lines are here. If we're talking about the Olympics, they have strict guidelines that we can just kind of copy paste over, and so I imagine that's probably what they'll go with. If we get into different states versus federal here in the U.S., and then obviously the Disc Golf Pro Tour now operating over in Europe may have a different set of rules, it makes the most sense to follow these Olympic rules, which are international rules that people need to use to participate in those competitions. Do I think we'll see anybody fall off? I don't really think so. I don't see disc golf as a huge as there being a huge advantage to people in disc golf who are using PEDs like in other sports that require more strength or maybe a little bit different kind of athleticism. I think disc golf is kind of unique in the way that an athlete is built to succeed in throwing a disc because people can be of all sizes. It's not like a high jump where you need really strong legs, or strongman where you need this giant upper body. So I don't think we'll see anybody fall off, but it is an interesting conversation.
Seth, what's your take here?
Yeah, it's interesting because Wes brings up a good point that we have differences between how Europe operates and how the U.S. operates when it comes to these things. I mean, in fact, right now we have a player on the U.S. Tour who is playing on the U.S. Tour because they've been banned in their country from competing because they tested positive for a substance. And that sort of like dichotomy is something that's going to have to be taken into consideration. I'm going to make this really hard. Like, I also agree that I don't think we're going to see too many people drop off because of what's being tested for. I do think that we may see some differences in performance from people because if what they're taking is actually helping them compete, then they're going to have to adjust, right? But I don't think that there's anything that they can't adjust for. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how it unfolds. But it is one more step towards the professionalization of the sport.
Good stuff from both of you guys. I love where you went with that conversation. I think it's a conversation that we will continue to have as a sport for the next several months. So Thanks for kicking that conversation off here on Leppy Duels. Wes, I'm going to give you the win here because you brought in that Europe versus United States and different tours, different parts of the world, different countries part of the conversation. I think that's a unique part of this that you don't necessarily think about if we're just sitting here in the United States thinking about the Pro Tour here. I'm glad you broadened our scopes there. So Wes takes the win in this duel. That means we are all tied up, 1 win apiece as we head to duel number 5. Let's see who's going to make a tiebreaker. Matt and Wes, you guys are up. Matt, you guys are up first, or you are up first. What is the best basket on the market? Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to be a little old school and a little new school. It's a toss-up for me. I'm a fan of both of these baskets for the same reason. I like the Mach X, to be honest with you. I like the way it catches. I do like the depth on the actual cage itself. And I do like a little bit of that interior chain grab as well, so you don't get so much of the flippy flop on the outside chains. For that same reason, and perhaps a slight edge, might be the Prodigy T2 baskets. I do like those. Again, they've got that interior chain control. The other thing I like about them, too, is the affordability of them. They're actually a decent price and something that can be used, very versatile as well. So those, to me, are 2 of the best for me. I like the way that they catch. If I was to go more traditional, I think I'd throw it out there. I like the original Chain Stars, to be honest with you, too, but I guess that makes me old school.
All right, Matt's a big proponent of inside chains catching his disc. Wes, where are you going?
Yeah, he mentioned the Prodigy basket. I'm not a huge fan of the Prodigy basket. Personal experience, probably, we're in Bowling Green, and that inner set of chains just really seems to push the disc like away from the pole instead of kind of hugging the disc or keeping it in, and I just didn't like that. There was a lot of spit outs I saw that I didn't feel like should have. I'm, of course, going to be biased on this one, but the Chain Star Pro is absolutely my favorite. I think the components that make a good basket or the best basket on the market, first off, I love the Discraft Red. Again, I know I'm a little biased, but it stands out on nearly every course, so you can see it. Even if you don't know the course, they're very visible. It has a band. I think the band is very important. Matt mentioned the Chain Star, which just kind of has the nubs. You get some weird play if you end up hitting the nubs versus the band. A band gives you a little bit more consistent reaction, although you of course, still get some funny bounces. And then also the 3 sets of chains. I think the inner set of chains is very important, but I think its primary duty is to be slowing the disc down and to catch the disc, and I think the Chain Star Pro does that really well with the gauge of chains and the setup of the chains in catching the disc, slowing it down, and directing it into the basket.
All right, good stuff. Different answers from both of you guys. Matt, why is your choice better than the Chain Star Pro?
What I was saying is in Houston, the last couple of years, for us at least, we've had a bit of a harsh winter, and a lot of the baskets around here have seen some shrinkage on the chains, if you will. And the Mach X's at our local courses have not seen as much wear and tear, and I think it's because that the inner set that they have there really kind of holds things together, and there's not as much slack with it. They've just held up better under the conditions that we have down here between humidity, heat, and the quote-unquote extreme cold we've had down here. So I do like them from a durability standpoint and the fact that they're good catchers.
All right, Wes, why is it the Chain Star Pro over the Mach X?
Yeah, if we want to talk about extreme cold, Michigan's got plenty of that, and we've got Chain Star Pros aplenty up here. Some thanks to the guys over at Great Lakes Disc, even getting them out around the courses in Michigan. I think the Chain Star Pro has all of the components of a good basket. We talked about the band, we talked about visibility, we talked about slowing the disc down with a good gauge of chains, but then most importantly, directing that disc into the basket. I think the basket size on them is adequate. The direction of the chains, that it deflects the disc into the basket. I don't think there's a better basket out there that does all of those things.
Good stuff from both of you guys. Matt, I'm glad you brought in the weather and local conditions. I think that's an important aspect. You also brought in price point. I think that's an interesting thing to bring up as well. But I think Wes got you. I think you kind of played into his argument. You brought in extreme cold in Texas. You can't really compare to extreme cold in Michigan. And yeah, the Chain Star Pros, they hold up just fine. So I'm giving the win to Wes here. Sends us to the next one. Who is going to be taking on Wes in the final? Will it be Brian? Will it be Seth? We're about to find out. Brian, you're going to be up first. Disc golf, just like a lot of other sports, has some unwritten rules, so to speak. What is your biggest pet peeve when a certain unwritten rule gets quote-unquote broken? Take it away, Brian.
Shout out to Disc Golf Twitter. I usually ask one question from this podcast a week on my Twitter, and this is the one I went with, and boy did I get some interesting answers. But specifically, shout out to my man Jim Deacon, who said shaking hands on the 18th tee box. Wait until you're finished. I literally was like, that's kind of a weird take, and the more I thought about it over the next day or so, I really do find that to be kind of an odd thing, especially in a really competitive round in a PDGA event. That final hole could really change where you land. So you're like wishing your opponent good luck right before they could beat you or you beat them. I'm cool with being friendly, but I thought that was kind of a unique thing that our sport does, or at least the people that I've played with over the last 15 years do. So that was kind of one of those unwritten rules. And then to close out, celebrations. We need to be bigger, louder. I don't care. I got a courtesy violation once at a MAO because someone made a really long throw in, and I was excited for them, and I went and ran and hugged them and was loud, and the next tee pad, the group in front of us gave me a courtesy violation. We should have more fun.
Brian wants more fun on the course. All right, Seth, where are you going with this one?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time because I think that I don't know. It's I don't have a whole lot of things that bother me. And so, I don't know, I could go through all of the different unwritten rules, right? Like, return a disc. Sure, if it has a name and number on it, you should probably return it. But also, if you don't have it, you don't have it. And then also, at the same time, 51, right? If you ace on a card, everyone should give you $5. If you hit metal, you should get one. Cool. If you have cash, do it. If you don't have cash, don't be butthurt about it. It's a whole new world. Sure, maybe you want to Venmo or PayPal someone, but what's that? $1 in digital currency is like nothing, it seems like. And then, the ones that Brian talked about, shaking hands or doing fist bumps at the end of the round. Cool. Is it weird? Maybe, but at the same time, it's something that does show camaraderie in an individual sport, which I think is actually kind of cool and makes us unique. And then from there, celebrations. I'm all in on celebrations. I think that getting a courtesy violation seems a little bit extreme, but I sponsor a player who mimics shooting a bazooka whenever he makes a long putt, so I can't get too bad about over the top celebrations. So yeah, I don't know where to go with this. I think that there's not anything that you should just be having fun on the course. I think that's my answer at the end of the day.
Sounds like Seth might want to concede this one. Brian, double down on your point.
Yeah, it's great when Seth doesn't say any point for the first 35 seconds of his argument and then closes out agreeing with my arguments, because that's just automatically a home run. So, ladies and gentlemen, what lesson should you take from this? Bring some fives, bring some ones, because Seth doesn't want your digital money. He only wants straight cash. I, however, want to celebrate and have fun with you.
All right, Seth, can you come back and redeem yourself?
Yeah, so the question in and of itself is a little weird, right? We're talking about what unwritten rule regarding disc golf etiquette bothers you most when it gets broken. And my whole perspective here is that if you're out on the disc golf course having fun, then you shouldn't be bothered by anything, right? You should be out there enjoying yourself, whether it's a competitive round or a fun round. There shouldn't be anything that bothers you, because at the end of the day, disc golf is a very chill sport, whether you're doing that in a chill way or just because you're a person who has fun. So I think that at the end of the day, talking about what bothers you just only sort of makes the sport something that I don't want to see it be.
All right, so I can't get off the initial arguments. Brian has to win this duel for sure. Brian's going to the final against Wes. Your tiebreaker question is disc golf or ball golf harder? Wes, you are up first.
Yeah, I have played both. I have probably played both equally in terms of number of years, not number of rounds though. And ball golf is absolutely harder. Hitting a golf ball straight is so freaking difficult and frustrating, and I think it's probably actually more of a mental battle than disc golf is, because that ball does not want to go straight. I think you have hundreds of yards of wide open air and grass, and you have this wide open 150-foot fairway that should be super easy to hit once, hit twice, get on the green and make a putt. But it's so difficult to get that tiny little ball in that tiny little hole when you have 100 acres of free space to hit that frickin' thing. It's absolutely ball golf, no question.
Brian, is it ball golf or disc golf?
I think to become a pro, it is much easier to play disc golf. But I would say that getting to the sport, ball golf is a little easier to get good at. One, you probably have the financial means if you're playing ball golf to get lessons. I was blessed enough to get lessons at a young age. I played competitive for about 10 years, and I absolutely ruined golf for me because it was too serious. Disc golf, first round was with the 8-year-olds at a summer camp. They made me crack up. I think since then I found disc golf. I played ball golf less than 10 times in 15 years. Disc golf, I think, really, honestly, is probably the easier off the street. If you pulled someone from the middle of Nairobi or something like that, I think they would have an easier time connecting with disc golf. That being said, there is no way in hell that I could ever get to 1,000 rated in disc golf, but I could probably go and cash in an amateur ball golf tournament right now.
All right, interesting finish to your argument there, Brian. You said ball golf is harder, but for you, maybe it's easier to achieve a certain level. So, Wes, why do you deserve to win this episode?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at general characteristics and qualities and athletic abilities that it takes to get a par on a disc golf hole, the average guy in Nairobi, as Brian said, can probably get a par in disc golf before he could ever get a par in ball golf. I know for myself, even having played for several years when I was younger, I played maybe once or twice a year now, but I might get one par per round out of 18. Out of 18 holes, maybe I get one if I'm having a good round. I think that you could take a new player out to your average disc golf course, and they would probably get a couple pars in a round. I don't think they would get a birdie, but I think they would get a couple pars. And so I think if you're just comparing the two and the athletic abilities required to be decent at the game without lessons, the average guy off the street from Nairobi, ball golf is absolutely harder.
Brian, why do you deserve this episode?
I deserve this episode because all my opponents went over time, and I was very courteous this week and not over. But specifically for this episode, there's no way I can par the hardest hole at Northwood if you give me 5 tries. I 100% could par the hardest hole at Pebble Beach if you gave me 5 tries.
Bold statement from Brian to finish there. I like it. I like the confidence. I think I am going to lean toward Wes, though, for this tie-breaking question. Wes, congratulations. You win Leppy Duels again. I believe you are now the most winningest contestant ever on the show, potentially. We'll have to check the records on that one. But congratulations to you. You've got the stage. What do you got for us?
Yeah, Disc Golf Pro Tour, if you are not subscribing to live coverage, you are goofing. I also want to shamelessly plug CCR Open. I've talked about a lot of different topics for this, but CCR Open, Reg is open for the AMs. We're on a wait list. There's still some pro spots, MPO and FPO. We talked a little bit in this episode about building up these A tiers and about the quality of these tournaments in relation to the Disc Golf Pro Tour events and how important it is to run good A tiers to have so that pros have a place to play. Maybe if they're not playing on the Pro Tour, they can't travel to the Pro Tour. We run a really good event. It's our 30th year. We have 3 film crews. We're going to have a professional photographer. As long as we don't have any mosquitoes, it's going to be another really great year for our tournament. So a little bit of a shameless plug for CCR Open. fueled by Great Lakes Disc this week. Check it out on Disc Golf Scene and hit me up if you got any questions.
I'm glad you brought in the mosquitoes, Wes. Don't worry about them if you're traveling. They're not that bad, except maybe a couple of times they get really bad. Anyway, definitely play the CCR if you're looking for a tournament to play midsummer. It's based right in the Michigan swing of the tour, so great tournament. Wes does an incredible job there. I'll be there. Wes will be there. We'd love to see you guys there. Thanks again for all of you guys being here. Wes, Brian, Seth, Matt. Congratulations again to Wes on another win here on Leppy Duels. All you guys at home, enjoy your weekend. We'll see you guys all next week.